You got a safe place to be heading tonight, sir? The question came from nowhere, the way they always do. Marcus Dade had been driving north on Route 22 for 43 minutes. The Virginia darkness wrapped around his truck like a second skin, the radio playing something soft and instrumental that didn't require thinking about. The blue lights appeared in his mirror first, silent, just the lights, before the strobes kicked on and turned the night into something fractured and strange. He had 37 miles left to Ashford. Marcus took his hands off the wheel and placed them deliberately at 10 and 2. The way you learn to do when your father teaches you that the first 5 seconds of any interaction are the ones that determine whether everyone goes home safe. He knew this from 2 things: childhood and 14 years wearing the uniform of the United States Navy SEAL teams. He knew it the way you know how to breathe. The officer approached on the driver's side, and Marcus watched him in the mirror before the beam of the flashlight hit his face. 31 years old, maybe Caucasian, carrying himself with that particular stiffness you see in men who are trying very hard to appear solid. The kind of solid that is often built on something very thin underneath. "License and registration," the officer said. Not a request, not quite a demand. Something in between. A specific calibration of authority that Marcus recognized because he had seen it used, and he had studied it, and he had learned that the men who used it best were often the most afraid. Marcus reached for the glove compartment with his right hand, moving slowly, speaking quietly. "Both documents are in the glove box. Officer, I'm going to reach—" "I can see what you're doing," the officer interrupted. The flashlight was still aimed at his face, and Marcus blinked once, waited for the adjustment to settle, and continued. He had learned this too. Don't change your pace. Don't show the frustration. The flashlight is not a weapon, even when it is used like one. He extracted the registration from the glove box and his license from his wallet, and held them out through the window. The officer took them with fingers that barely touched the cards, and Marcus noticed that he held the driver's license at an odd angle, bending it slightly between his thumb and forefinger, not accidentally, not carelessly. The kind of thing you do to show someone exactly what you think of them. The officer's name tag said Calloway. "Wait here," Calloway said, and walked back to his cruiser. Marcus sat alone in the truck with the engine idling and the telescope on the back seat. The telescope was in a long canvas case, carefully wrapped, with Jade's name engraved on the eyepiece in letters so small you almost couldn't see them. Marcus had spent 40 minutes in the shop in Virginia Beach, making sure it was exactly right. Jade was turning 7 tomorrow morning. She had told her uncle on a video call 6 weeks ago that she wanted to be an astronomer. She had seen a picture of Jupiter in a library book, and she said, "Uncle Marcus, I want to see what's out there." Marcus had driven 40 minutes to find her a telescope that would hold up to the asking. It had cost $180. He had not regretted a single cent. Now the telescope sat on the back seat, while an officer who was 10 years younger than Marcus stood in the glow of his patrol car and ran his information. And Marcus sat with his hands at 10 and 2, thinking not about his rights, not about his training, not about the specific ways he could end this encounter without injury to anyone, including Calloway, in under 4 seconds. He was thinking about making it to Ashford by morning. Officer Calloway returned 8 minutes later. 8 minutes for a clean record to come back. 8 minutes to read whatever the National Criminal Information Center returned about a man named Marcus Dade, Chief Petty Officer, United States Navy, stationed at Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek, the same base that produced 40% of the nation's special operations personnel. Where are you coming from? Calloway asked. Base, Marcus said. Norfolk area. What's your business on Route 22? Heading to see my sister, Ashford. She lives just south of the town limits. What's in the back seat? Marcus's eyes shifted to the mirror. The telescope case was visible, long and narrow, and unmistakably the shape of something you take somewhere on purpose. A gift from my niece, Marcus said. Birthday tomorrow. Calloway walked around to the back window of the truck, his flashlight beam finding the case. He stood there for a moment, not moving, not looking away. Marcus could see his face in the mirror. It was the face of a man who was calculating something. Not rage, not fear, not even anger. Something closer to satisfaction. When Calloway came back to the driver's window, his entire demeanor had changed. It had become more official, more measured, more dangerous. I'm going to have to ask you to step out of the vehicle, sir, he said. May I ask why? Marcus kept his voice even. Professional, the kind of voice you use in a courtroom or in a classroom, when precision of language matters more than emotion. Step out of the vehicle. Now. Marcus released his seatbelt and opened the door. The night was cooler than he expected, and he could smell pine trees and something else, the chemical sharpness of the asphalt. He stepped down from the truck, and Calloway immediately gestured toward the rear bumper. Feet together, hands where I can see them. Marcus positioned himself as instructed. Feet together, hands visible. The posture of compliance. The posture of a man who understands what is happening and is choosing not to make it worse. This is what his father had taught him, though his father had never had to say it directly. His father had just collected the tickets in a shoebox and kept driving the same route home from football practice. 23 years of the same route, 14 times stopped. And the tickets in the shoebox under the bed like evidence of something that had not been survived, so much as absorbed. I need to search your vehicle, Calloway said. Is there probable cause? Marcus asked. The question was a mistake. Marcus knew it immediately because he saw Calloway's jaw tighten, and he saw the flashlight beam shift to a place lower than it had been before. The question had been the right legal question. It was the wrong living question. I have reasonable suspicion, Calloway said, and the way he said it made Marcus understand that reasonable suspicion was going to mean whatever Calloway needed it to mean. I don't consent to a search, Marcus said quietly. I didn't ask for consent. Calloway said. He walked back to the truck and opened the driver's door. Marcus heard him moving through the cab, heard the sound of the glove box opening again, heard the rustle of registration papers being shuffled. He heard Calloway move to the back seat. He heard the sound of the telescope case being handled, and then he heard silence. Marcus kept his eyes forward, watching the darkness of Route 22. A car passed in the opposite direction, its headlights briefly illuminating the scene. And Marcus saw the driver look away quickly, as if seeing a police stop was something you learned to unsee. The car was gone in 2 seconds. Calloway emerged from the truck with the telescope case in his hands. What did you say this was? He asked. A gift for my niece, Marcus said. A telescope. Calloway laid the case across the hood of the truck and opened it. Marcus heard the careful unzipping of the canvas, heard the moment when Calloway saw the telescope itself, the brass eyepiece, the nameplate with Jade's name engraved in letters that took a careful hand to make small enough. That's very specific, Calloway said. A gift with a name already on it. You sure about that story? It's a gift, Marcus said. Her name is Jade. She's turning 7 tomorrow. Calloway held the telescope up to the red and blue wash of his patrol car's lights. Marcus could see the way he turned it, the way he examined it, the way he ran his finger along Jade's name as if he were testing to see if it was real. "You got all your papers in order?" Calloway asked. "Yes," Marcus said. "Registration matches the vehicle." "Yes." "License current?" "Yes." "Been drinking tonight?" "No." "You sure about that?" "I'm sure." Calloway set the telescope back on the hood of the truck, still cradled in its case, and looked at Marcus for the first time since he had asked him to step out of the vehicle. It was a long look, the kind of look you give someone when you are about to change the entire evening into something different. "I'm going to need you to turn around," Calloway said, "hands behind your back." "Why?" Marcus asked. The question was automatic. He already knew he was going to comply. He already understood that this was not a moment where understanding the law would help him. This was a moment where the only thing that mattered was getting to Ashford, getting to Jade's birthday, getting the telescope to her porch so she could see Jupiter the way it was meant to be seen. "Because I asked," Calloway said. Marcus turned around. He placed his hands behind his back. He felt the moment when the handcuffs came out of Calloway's belt, felt the cool metal circle his wrists, felt the ratcheting sound of them tightening. He felt the click of the connection, and he felt the moment when his hands were no longer his own. "You're under arrest," Calloway said. The words seemed to come from very far away, even though Marcus could feel Calloway's breath on his neck, could feel the radio on Calloway's belt. The words seemed to arrive at his ears the way things arrive in a dream, already translated from language into something else entirely. "What's the charge?" Marcus asked. "Suspected drug trafficking," Calloway said. "I observed paraphernalia in your vehicle." The lie was so complete, so unambiguous, so perfectly crafted that Marcus almost had to admire it. The telescope, the brass telescope with Jade's name engraved on the eyepiece. The perfectly wrapped gift for a girl who wanted to be an astronomer. All of it. Paraphernalia. Marcus had processed a lot of information in his career. He had learned to calculate variables in milliseconds. He had been trained to read situations the way other people read books. He had sat in vehicles and thought about exits, angles, force vectors, time, the specific mathematics of survival. In this moment, all of that training told him one very clear thing: if he said anything, if he so much as raised his voice, if he showed the specific anger that was building in his chest like a bird with a broken wing, he would miss Jade's birthday. The paperwork of a justified takedown of a cop on a dark highway would keep him in custody just as surely as jail time would. And the way you win matters as much as whether you win. His father had taught him that. His training in the SEAL teams had confirmed it. Everything he had built his life around depended on his ability to keep walking forward. So he did. He walked forward. He walked to the back of Calloway's patrol car. He felt the pressure of a hand on the back of his head, the specific care taken not to bump his skull on the door frame as he was guided into the back seat. He sat in the back of a police car with his hands behind his back, the plastic of the seat underneath him. The safety locks activated so he could not open the doors from the inside. Through the window, he could see the telescope case on the hood of his truck. He could see Jade's name in the darkness. The drive to the Ashford Police Department took 18 minutes. Marcus counted them. He counted them not out of anxiety, but out of habit. Seconds become minutes, become hours, become years. And if you don't keep track of the seconds, You wake up one day and realize the minutes have been stolen from you. His father had kept a shoebox of evidence. Marcus kept time. It was different, but it was also, in its own way, the same thing. When they arrived at the precinct, Officer Calloway extracted him from the back of the cruiser with the same care he had used when putting him in professional, by the book. The kind of arrest that would be recorded, documented, and later, if someone asked the right questions, would come back clean. The intake happened the way intakes always happen. Name, date of birth, address, emergency contact. In the space for charges, the booking officer, a woman named Hutchins, who looked like she had processed 1,000 arrests and had perfected the art of not thinking about any of them, wrote, "Suspected possession with intent to distribute." "That's wrong," Marcus said. "The charge should be—" "We don't dispute charges at booking," Hutchins said without looking at him. "That comes later." His possessions were inventoried. His watch, his wallet, the small notebook he carried in his back pocket where he sometimes wrote observations about training, his keys, his phone. Each item was placed in a plastic bin and labeled with a number. The number was 4,271. He was not a name anymore. He was a number. "Is there anything else in your pockets?" Hutchins asked. "No," Marcus said. She patted him down anyway, the way they do. The way was both thorough and impersonal. She found nothing because there was nothing to find. When she was finished, she pointed to a holding cell. "You'll be processed through here until you can see a judge," she said. "That should be sometime tomorrow morning. Don't make trouble, and you won't get trouble." The cell was standard issue, 6 feet by 8 feet, a metal bench, a toilet with no privacy, a camera in the corner recording everything. Marcus sat on the bench and placed his hands on his thighs and tried to think about the telescope, about Jade, about the 7-year-old girl who wanted to be an astronomer. He could not think about anything else. The night was very long. No one came to tell him anything. No one came to offer him a phone call. The other holding cells were empty, which meant Calloway had made sure he was alone. Alone with his thoughts and the sound of the precinct working around him. Voices from the bullpen. The hum of fluorescent lights. The small noises of a police station at night. The machinery of authority running perfectly. Somewhere around 3 in the morning, Marcus heard a familiar name through the wall of the holding cell. Hargrove. The voice was saying something about an admiral, about a JAG call, about a big problem about to walk through the door. Sergeant Paul Grieco had been reading the NCIC report when Lieutenant Commander Sarah Ortega had called the Ashford Police Department from Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek. And when Grieco heard her name, when he heard her title, when he understood that a JAG officer was calling about an arrest made on Route 22, everything that he had not thought about for 3 years came rushing back into the room with him. And he understood, with the specific clarity of a man who had been avoiding an answer, that the drawer under his desk needed to be opened. But that was tomorrow, tonight. Marcus sat in a holding cell and tried to imagine Jupiter through the eyes of a 7-year-old girl who would wake up on her birthday and her uncle would not be there. The morning came the way mornings do when you have not slept. It arrives all at once, full force. And everything you were holding together during the night collapses in the face of actual daylight. Marcus had sat on that metal bench for 7 hours and had not closed his eyes. Around 6 a.m., a custody officer came to the cell and said, "Arraignment is at 8. They're getting you ready now." At 6:04 a.m. at Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Ortega answered the duty line. Her voice was the careful, measured voice of someone who had spent 12 years in military law and had learned that authority exercised with precision was the only kind that lasted. When the voice on the other end identified himself as Marcus Dade and explained the situation, Ortega felt the specific weight of a moment that was about to become important settle onto her shoulders. She had 30 minutes. She called the base legal team. She called the Ashford Police Department and requested all arresting documentation. She called the courthouse and asked to be placed on the docket for the arraignment. And then, in the 30 minutes between Marcus's call and her drive to the courthouse, she did something that would change everything. She searched the Route 22 complaint files. The files were not hidden. They were not sealed. They were simply listed in the index of traffic stops, flagged but not accessed. The way files are flagged when someone does not quite want to deal with them, but also does not want to destroy them. Ortega had been in the military long enough to recognize the architecture of willful ignorance. She found 4 complaints, one from a man named Thomas Bailey, stopped twice in 18 months, both times for equipment violations that did not exist. One from a man named Peter Gonzalez, stopped and questioned about the legality of the cash in his vehicle, $480 in small bills, seized under civil asset forfeiture, his vehicle released, but his money kept. One from a woman named Maria Fuentes, stopped on the same route. Same officer, same charge, same result. And now, one from Marcus Dade. She made copies. She put them in a manila envelope. She drove to the courthouse. The courtroom was standard issue. Judge Carolyn Hayes presided from the bench, a woman who had spent 17 years managing Ashford's municipal court with a kind of weary professionalism that came from processing the same crimes again and again and understanding that nothing changed because no one ever made it change. Officer Calloway stood with his charging documents. A public defender named Michael Torres had been assigned to Marcus's case roughly 45 minutes ago and knew almost nothing about him. Marcus was brought in wearing the orange jumpsuit that the Ashford Police Department issued to detained prisoners. His hands were empty because his hands were no longer his own. The chain around his waist connected to the chain around his wrists, and he carried with him the specific weight of being simultaneously in the room and separated from it. "How do you plead?" Judge Hayes asked. "Not guilty," Marcus said. Officer Calloway stepped forward. His uniform was pristine. His demeanor was professional. He had crafted his statement carefully. Suspected transportation of controlled substances. Paraphernalia observed in the vehicle. Reasonable suspicion of distribution. He did not mention the telescope. He did not mention Jade. He did not mention the name engraved on the eyepiece. He simply presented a narrative that existed in the absence of these things. And because the absence was what made the room comfortable, no one questioned it. "Officer Calloway, can you describe the paraphernalia you observed?" Judge Hayes asked. Calloway hesitated. For a moment, Marcus thought he saw it. The moment when Calloway had to actually describe a telescope as drug equipment, had to actually say the words that would make this lie complete. The moment held. It felt like it lasted forever. The subject had a narrow cylindrical object, Calloway said carefully. Hollow, could be used for various purposes. The words landed in the courtroom like smoke. A narrow cylindrical object, hollow, could be used for various purposes. It was technically true. It was also technically meaningless. Torres stood. "Your Honor, that description is vague. The officer has not identified what the object actually is or provided any evidence that it constitutes paraphernalia." The investigation is ongoing, Calloway said. It was at this moment that Lieutenant Commander Sarah Ortega stood and stepped into the courtroom. She was wearing her dress uniform, and the courtroom felt the shift immediately. Military presence, JAG Corps authority, the specific weight of the federal government suddenly having opinions about what happened in Ashford Municipal Court. Judge Hayes looked up. "Your Honor," Ortega said, "I am Lieutenant Commander Sarah Ortega, Naval Justice Command, representing the defendant's command. I would like to present some documentation that may be relevant to this case." She approached the bench and handed Judge Hayes the manila envelope. The courtroom watched as Hayes opened it. She read the documents. Once, twice. The expression on her face changed. It did not change dramatically. It was too much practiced professionalism for that. But it changed. The room felt it change. "Your Honor," Ortega continued, "the object in question is a telescope. It is a gift from the defendant to his 7-year-old niece. The defendant's military record is 14 years without blemish, 3 combat deployments, multiple commendations, and a current assignment as lead instructor at his command. The stop that led to this arrest was conducted with the same level of suspicion that has, according to these files, led to the stops of 4 other individuals in the past 3 years on the same stretch of Route 22. I would also note that Officer Calloway's assertion that the object constitutes paraphernalia contradicts its actual nature." Judge Hayes set the envelope down. She looked at Officer Calloway. She looked at Calloway's charging paperwork. She looked at Marcus, standing in an orange jumpsuit in her courtroom, connected to chains, his life suspended on the basis of a telescope. "Officer Calloway," she said, "can you produce physical evidence of controlled substances in the defendant's vehicle or person?" Calloway stood very still. "The search is still being processed," he said. "That's a no," Hayes said quietly. "And can you provide any physical description of the alleged paraphernalia that would actually distinguish it from a legitimate object?" "The investigation is ongoing," Calloway said. The words were becoming familiar. They were becoming a problem. Judge Hayes set her pen down. She removed her glasses. She rubbed her eyes the way a person does when they are about to say something they know they should have said a long time ago. "The charges against Chief Petty Officer Marcus Dade are hereby dismissed. The defendant is released on his own recognizance, effective immediately. Officer Calloway, I want a detailed incident report on my desk by end of business today. I would also like to understand why 4 complaints against this officer from the same location span 3 years without being processed. Clerk, order the release of the defendant's personal items and his vehicle." The gavel came down. It took 45 minutes for Marcus to be processed out. They gave him back his watch, his wallet, his small notebook, his keys, his phone. They gave him back the components of his life in a plastic bin marked 4271. He signed the release form with a pen that didn't quite work and walked out of the Ashford Police Department into a morning that had become very bright. His truck was in the evidence lot. The telescope was inside, still in its canvas case, still bearing Jade's name, still waiting to show a 7-year-old girl the thing that waited beyond the world she knew. Marcus drove south toward Renee's house. The time was 8:47 a.m. Jade's birthday party was supposed to start at 10. It might still happen. The cake might still be there. The decorations might still be up. But the morning had shifted. The morning belonged now to something else. He was about to learn that the worst part of being wrongly arrested is not the arrest. It's what comes after. Jade was waiting on the porch when Marcus pulled up to Renee's house. She was wearing a dress with purple stripes and a tiara that said 7 in plastic letters. And when she saw the truck, she ran down the driveway and launched herself at her uncle with the specific force that only a 7-year-old girl who had been waiting her whole life for this moment could muster. "You came," she said, burying her face in his chest. "You're late, but you came." Marcus held her. He held her the way he had held a lot of things in his life, carefully, deliberately, aware that he was being trusted with something valuable and fragile. She smelled like cake and pancake syrup, and the particular sweetness that children seem to accumulate just from being alive. "I promised," he said. Renee came out of the house. She had been crying. Marcus could see it in her face, in the way her eyes were red, in the specific exhaustion that comes from holding hope and fear at the same time and not knowing which one was going to win. "Marcus," she said, and the way she said his name contained an entire conversation that neither of them needed to have out loud. "I have something for you," he said to Jade, and he went to the truck and retrieved the telescope case. He laid it on the grass in front of the house, and he unzipped the canvas, and he extracted the telescope and held it up so that Jade could see it in the daylight. Jade's face went very still. "Is that for me?" she asked. "It is," Marcus said, "and there's something on the eyepiece." She stepped closer and saw her name, written in letters so small that you had to be paying attention to see them. She traced the letters with her finger. "How did you know how to spell it right?" she asked. "Because you showed me how to spell it," Marcus said. "On a video call. You didn't think I remembered, but I did." Jade took the telescope. She was not very tall, and the telescope was almost as long as her arm, but she held it like she had been holding telescopes her whole life. She aimed it at the sky, but it was daytime, and she lowered it and aimed it at the tree line, and then at the house across the street, and then back at Marcus. "Thank you," she said, and the words were small and formal and contained everything that a 7-year-old girl's gratitude could possibly contain. Renee looked at Marcus. "What happened?" she asked quietly. "I'll explain later," he said. "But I made it. I'm here. That's what matters." The birthday party continued. There was cake, chocolate, Jade's favorite, and there were decorations that Renee had clearly spent a lot of time arranging. There were presents from Renee and her husband David, wrapped and organized and waiting. But there was also the telescope. And after Jade opened everything else, that was the only thing she came back to. She carried it from room to room. She held it the way you hold something precious. At 4 p.m, after the party had wound down and the decorations had been taken down and the cake had been reduced to crumbs, Marcus sat with Renee on the back porch while Jade played in the yard with the telescope. Her father was showing her how to clean the lens without smudging it. "Tell me," Renee said. Marcus told her. He told her about Route 22 and the red and blue lights. He told her about Officer Calloway and the telescope being paraphernalia. He told her about the holding cell and the night that would not end. He told her about the arraignment and Lieutenant Commander Ortega and the specific moment when Judge Hayes realized what had been done. Renee listened. She listened without interrupting. The way you listen to a story about something that almost happened but didn't quite, and by the grace of some specific luck, did not happen at all. "You're going to call the base," she said when he finished. "You're going to tell them everything. You're going to follow the proper channels, and you're going to let the military take care of this." "I know," Marcus said. "And you're not going to do anything else," she said. "You're not going to go back to that police department. You're not going to go find that officer. You're going to let the system work." "I know," Marcus said. "I need to hear you say it," Renee said. "I'm going to let the system work." Marcus said. Renee looked at him. "I don't believe you," she said. "But I'm going to pretend to, because if I don't, I'm going to start crying, and I've already done enough of that today." That evening, Marcus called Commander Ortega. She answered on the second ring, as if she had been expecting his call. "Chief," she said, "how's Jade?" "She got the telescope," Marcus said. "She has it in the yard right now, looking for stars that aren't visible in daylight." "That's good," Ortega said. "That's very good. I'm calling a meeting with the command, and we're going to discuss how we proceed from here. I want you to come in tomorrow morning at 0700 hours. Wear dress uniform." "Roger," Marcus said. The meeting happened at 0700 hours the next morning, and it changed everything that would come after. Rear Admiral James Hargrove was present. Admiral Hargrove commanded Naval Special Warfare Command, East Coast, and his authority extended to every SEAL, every piece of equipment, and every decision made within 300 miles of the Virginia coast. He was 58 years old, had spent 35 years in the Navy, had been a SEAL himself before his promotion to flag rank, and carried with him the specific weight of a man who had understood, very early in his career, that the way you carried yourself mattered more than anything you said. He read Calloway's incident report. He read Ortega's documentation of the other stops. He read the charging documents. And then he closed the file and looked at Marcus. "He bent your card," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir," Marcus said. "Deliberately." "Yes, sir." The Admiral was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was very even, very precise, and contained no emotion whatsoever. "Officer Calloway made 3 mistakes," he said. "First, he arrested a man under his command. Second, he did it on the basis of a lie. Third, he did it while that man was trying to get home to his family. Those are 3 things that Calloway should have understood would not be tolerated. I intend to make sure that he understands now." The investigation that followed took 4 weeks. It was not a casual investigation. It was the kind of investigation that happened when the federal government decided to pay attention, and the federal government, in the form of the Naval Justice Command and the FBI Civil Rights Division, had decided to pay very close attention indeed. Special Agent Diana Reyes arrived in Ashford with a team and a mandate. Her team interviewed Officer Calloway. They interviewed Sergeant Grieco. They interviewed every officer who had worked the Route 22 corridor in the past 3 years. They pulled traffic camera footage. They reviewed dispatch logs. They examined every stop that Calloway had made on that stretch of road. What they found was a pattern so clear that it barely required investigation. Calloway had made 41 stops on Route 22 in the past 3 years. 31 of them had been of people of color. 14 of those 31 had resulted in civil asset forfeiture. The total amount seized was approximately $280,000. Only 3 of those seizures had been formally returned. Maria Fuentes' $480 was not among them. The file that Sergeant Grieco had placed in the drawer 3 years ago was pulled out. It was placed in federal hands. It was examined alongside the others, and it became not a complaint, but evidence. Evidence of a pattern. Evidence of a practice. Evidence of something built into the institution itself. When the federal charges came down, they came down hard. Officer Brett Calloway was arrested on federal civil rights violations, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and theft by extortion. The charges carried sentences that could stretch 10 years into his future. His bail was set at $150,000. His career in law enforcement was finished. But the story did not end with Calloway. The story ended with what Calloway's arrest had revealed. The story ended with 66 complaints. 66 people who had been stopped on Route 22 at night and found their lives changed because they did not fit a particular profile. 66 people who had filed complaints and been told to wait. 66 people who had waited and waited and waited some more. 66 people who had finally been believed because one man had been wrongly arrested. And his uncle had a telescope with a name engraved on the eyepiece. To understand Officer Brett Calloway is to understand the particular architecture of failure. He was born in 1993 in a town called Strasburg, Virginia, which is 140 miles south of where he would eventually stand in a police uniform on Route 22. His father was a general contractor. His mother worked at a bank. He had one brother, 3 years older, who joined the Marine Corps and deployed twice and came home and took over the family contracting business. A success story written in the language of American aspiration. Brett Calloway wanted something else. He joined the Army at 22 with the specific intention of becoming a Ranger. The Rangers are the most elite light infantry unit in the United States military. They conduct rapid assaults on high-value targets, ISAs. They operate in the places where the Army needs soldiers who can move faster, hit harder, and ask fewer questions. The selection process is called RASP, Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, and it lasts 3 weeks and is designed to break every person who enters it in a different way. Calloway made it to day 11 of RASP before he quit. The reason he gave was medical, a knee injury that the medical record noted as insufficient to warrant withdrawal. The record was clear. Calloway did not fail the physical standard. He quit. The reason he told people was different. The reason he told people was that he had been rejected for medical reasons. This lie, small, private, unnecessary to maintain, became the story that Calloway told himself every day of his life after that moment. The story that he was a victim. The story that the system had rejected him. The story that, if circumstances had been different, he would have been a Ranger, would have been special, would have been what his brother had become, but better. 4 years later, at 26, Calloway joined the Ashford Police Department. The application process took 3 months. He passed the background check. He passed the psychological evaluation, which was conducted by a psychiatrist who asked standard questions and received standard answers, and did not think to ask what the particular smell of military failure might smell like to someone who had breathed it for 4 years. Calloway discovered something very quickly. A police badge could make a man feel like he had passed. You did not have to pass a selection. You just had to pin on the uniform. You did not have to earn the stillness that came from being in real danger. You just had to learn to stand still while people answered your questions. You did not have to become anything. You just had to look like you had become something. The badge was the greatest discovery of Calloway's adult life. He used it the way you use a weapon when you are afraid. Not precisely, not carefully, but with the specific clumsiness that comes from an excess of fear. He stopped military vehicles when he could. He was harder on men who carried themselves with the particular stillness of people who had been in real danger. He learned to deploy "sir" precisely when he meant the opposite. He watched videos of Rangers training. He read books about special operations. He built a life in the margins of military culture, close enough to feel the heat of it, far enough away that no one could see the sweat on his palms, The civil asset forfeiture was the mutation where the fear became something else. It was the place where Calloway realized that if he could take money from people on the side of the road, he could be the person who decided what happened next. He could be the judge and the jury and the executioner. He could be the force that mattered. The first person he did this to was Thomas Bailey, a pharmaceutical salesman who happened to have $8,000 in cash in his vehicle after a weekend selling convention. Calloway pulled him over on the basis of a cracked taillight that did not exist. He searched the vehicle on the basis of a suspicion that he could not articulate. He found the cash and seized it under civil asset forfeiture, which is the particular power the government has to take money from anyone at any time and require them to prove that the money is legitimate. Most people cannot afford the legal fight. Most people give up. Thomas Bailey gave up. It felt, to Calloway, like winning. He did it again, and again, and again, 41 times. 31 of those times to people of color. 14 times to people who could not afford the legal fight that would be required to get their money back. $280,000 transferred from people's lives to the machinery of the Ashford Police Department through a process that Calloway had discovered was almost completely unaccountable. What Calloway did not understand, because he had never had to understand it, was that each person he stopped saw him and understood, in the space of a few seconds, that they were being hunted. They understood that the reason for the stop did not matter. They understood that the justification would be constructed after the fact. They understood that they were in danger not because they had done anything wrong, but because they fit a pattern that Calloway had decided to hunt. What Calloway did not understand was that Maria Fuentes, when she was stopped and her $480 were seized, the week's earnings that she had kept in cash because she did not trust banks, understood that the message Calloway was sending was not about law enforcement. It was about power. It was about a man with a badge deciding that her money was his to take. What Calloway did not understand was that each complaint filed by one of his victims was not being ignored because the system was broken. It was being ignored because Sergeant Paul Greco, who reviewed those complaints, had decided that looking at them would require him to do something about them, and doing something about them would require him to admit that he had known for 3 years that something was wrong and had chosen not to intervene. What Calloway did not understand was that the moment he pulled over Marcus Dade on Route 22, all of this was about to change. The trial happened on a Tuesday in November, 4 months after the initial arrest. The federal courthouse in Richmond, Virginia, was packed. There were officers from the Ashford Police Department sitting in the gallery. There was the brass from Naval Special Warfare Command. There were reporters. There were people who had been stopped on Route 22. There was Maria Fuentes with her sister sitting quietly, the $480 still sitting in a drawer at home, still waiting for an apology. The prosecution's case was straightforward. Officer Calloway had arrested Chief Petty Officer Marcus Dade on the basis of false charges. He had called a telescope paraphernalia. He had lied in his incident report. He had bent Marcus's military credentials deliberately, as evidenced by the photograph taken by dispatch of the vehicle immediately after the stop, showing the bent card still in Calloway's hand. The prosecution presented 4 other victims. Thomas Bailey testified about the taillight that did not exist. Peter Gonzalez testified about the $400 that had been seized and never returned. A woman named Keisha Johnson testified about being pulled over 3 times in 18 months for equipment violations that turned out not to exist when she brought the vehicle to a mechanic. And then Maria Fuentes testified. She was 52 years old. She had been coming to America for 20 years to work as a home health aide for people who could not care for themselves. She had a daughter in college. She had a daughter in high school. She had built a life on the principle that if you worked hard and followed the rules, the country would be good to you. Officer Calloway had taken her $480 and told her that civil asset forfeiture was the law. And she had believed him. Because who was she to question a police officer? The prosecutor asked her a simple question. Miss Doncit Fuentes, did you file a complaint about this seizure? Yes, she said. And what happened when you filed it? Nothing, she said. She was crying by this point, and the entire courtroom was very quiet. I filed it 3 times. I called. I asked them to return my money. They said it was being reviewed. They said it was complicated. They said I should wait, and I did. I waited for 3 years. The defense had to put Calloway on the stand. There was no way around it. The case against him was too specific, too documented, too clear. Without his testimony, the jury would construct the entire narrative from the prosecution's perspective. And the prosecution's perspective was not good for Calloway. When he took the stand, Calloway was wearing a suit that did not quite fit him. He had lost weight in the months since his arrest. He had the look of a man whose life had contracted around a single, terrible moment, and he had not yet learned how to expand it again. The defense attorney walked him through his version of events. She asked him about the stop. She asked him about the search. She asked him about the paraphernalia. And Calloway told a story that was technically true, but essentially false. He had seen the telescope. He had not understood what it was. He had been suspicious. He had arrested the defendant based on reasonable suspicion, which was what the law allowed him to do. Officer Calloway, the prosecutor said when it was her turn, did you ever, during the entire stop of Chief Petty Officer Marcus Dade, actually believe that he was in possession of controlled substances? Calloway hesitated. I had reasonable suspicion, he said. That's not what I asked. The prosecutor said, I asked if you believed he was in possession of controlled substances. I believed he might be, Calloway said. Based on what? Based on the object in his vehicle, which was a telescope. I didn't know that at the time, Calloway said. You knew that before the arrest. The prosecutor said, you examined the case. You saw the name on the eyepiece. You knew exactly what it was, didn't you? The courtroom was completely quiet. Everyone was waiting for Calloway to lie. Everyone knew he was going to lie. Everyone could see it building in his face like a storm cloud. I was making a lawful arrest based on reasonable suspicion, Calloway said. That's a no, the prosecutor said. Then came Sergeant Paul Grieco. Grieco was 60 years old and had spent 40 years in law enforcement, 20 of them with the Ashford Police Department. He was a man who had mastered the art of not asking questions. He had learned over 2 decades that not asking questions was how you survived in an institution that required complicity. He had never filed a complaint against an officer. He had never reported misconduct. He had learned that the price of being a cop was the price of knowing things and not saying them. Until the night of Marcus Dade's arrest, the prosecutor showed him the complaint that Maria Fuentes had filed 3 years ago. She showed him the drawer where it had been placed. She showed him the other complaints, all of them filed on similar Route 22 stops, all of them involving Officer Calloway, all of them involving people of color, all of them placed in the same drawer. Sergeant Grieco, the prosecutor asked, what is the procedure for processing a complaint against a fellow officer? The complaint is filed, Grieco said. It is reviewed by the department. If it has merit, it is forwarded to internal affairs. If it does not have merit, it is dismissed. And Maria Fuentes' complaint Did you review it? I received it, Grieco said. Did you review it? Grieco was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was very different. It was the voice of a man who was about to say something he had been avoiding for 3 years. I filed it in a drawer, he said. I did not review it. I did not forward it to internal affairs. I did not follow procedure. Why not? The prosecutor asked. Because, Grieco said. And he was crying now, the tears running down his face the way tears run when you have been holding them back for 3 years and finally stop trying to hold them anymore. Because if I reviewed it, I would have to do something about it. And if I did something about it, I would have to admit that I knew what was happening, and I couldn't afford to know. So I filed it in a drawer, and I didn't open that drawer again. And I didn't ask myself the question, but I should have asked myself the question. The courtroom was absolutely silent. What question? The prosecutor asked quietly. The question of whether I was a police officer, Grieco said. The question of whether what I was doing was law enforcement or whether it was just looking away. 6 months after Marcus's arrest, Jade turned 8. Her birthday this time fell on a Saturday, and Marcus made sure that he was there on Friday night. He drove down from Norfolk on Friday afternoon, and he stopped at a bakery in Virginia Beach and bought chocolate cake, the same kind that Jade had preferred at her 7th birthday party. And he drove to Renee's house and found Jade waiting on the porch with the telescope. She had been looking at Jupiter. Uncle Marcus, she said, and she was still the same girl, but she was also older in a way that Marcus could not quite measure. The world had done something to her. The world had become a place where her uncle could be arrested on the side of the road for bringing her a gift. And it had changed something in how she understood the world. Tell me what you see, Marcus said, and they sat on the grass as the sun went down. And Jade pointed out the details of Jupiter's surface through the telescope. She had learned the names of the bands, the great red spot, the smaller spots, the way the planet rotated. She had learned what she was looking at. She had given it attention. There's a storm on Jupiter, she said. It's been going for 400 years, and it's still there. It doesn't knock the planet out of orbit. Marcus looked at his niece. She was 8 years old. She was talking about storms and planets and the way things persevere, even when there is something wrong at their core. That's right, he said. Does that happen to people? She asked. What do you mean? Marcus asked. Do we have storms? She said. Can you have a storm inside you and still orbit? Marcus was quiet for a moment. He was quiet because the question his niece was asking contained an entire philosophy of survival, and he was not sure he had an answer that was true. Yes, he said finally. I think you can have storms inside you and still move forward. I think that's what most people do. Jade seemed satisfied with this answer. She looked back at Jupiter and adjusted the telescope slightly, searching for something new. The trial had ended. Calloway had been convicted on 3 counts. The sentencing came down to 10 years, with a possibility of parole after 5. Maria Fuentes' $480 had been returned with a letter that said she was owed more than money. She was owed an apology, and the apology was official, and the apology was written down, and the apology was in her file. The 66 other people who had been stopped on Route 22 were now part of a larger investigation that had expanded to include the entire Ashford Police Department. The way investigations expand when someone finally decides to look at the machinery instead of just the individual. But none of that was why Marcus was sitting on the grass with his niece on a Friday night in the spring. None of that was why he had driven 4 hours to sit on his sister's lawn and watch an 8-year-old girl with a telescope look for storms that had lasted 400 years. He was there because he had promised. He was there because the way you win matters as much as whether you win. The trial testimony of Admiral Hargrove came on the last day of prosecution witness. He had requested to testify. The court had allowed it. When Admiral Hargrove entered the courtroom, everyone felt it. Not because he was loud, not because he commanded attention, but because he carried with him the specific weight of authority that has been earned through suffering. And he walked into that room like a man who had seen real danger and had understood that the proper response to danger is not to flinch, but to stand still. He walked past every police officer in the room without looking at them. The first thing he did when he entered the court was look at Marcus, sitting in the gallery. The second thing he did was look at Marcus's wrists. When he took the stand, the prosecutor asked him a simple question. Admiral Hargrove, can you tell us about Chief Petty Officer Marcus Dade's military record? Chief Dade has served 14 years in the Navy SEAL teams, the Admiral said. He has completed 3 combat deployments, 2 in the Panjshir Valley and 1 in the Horn of Africa. He has instructed approximately 400 personnel in advanced sniper tactics. He has never been disciplined. He has never filed a complaint against a fellow service member. He has never used force except when it was legally and tactically justified. He is, in my assessment, a man of exemplary character. And you personally signed his last promotion, the prosecutor said. I did, the Admiral said. Why would you promote someone to a sensitive position if they had any doubt about their character? I would not, the Admiral said, when the prosecutor finished. The defense attorney rose to cross-examine. The Admiral waited. Admiral Hargrove, she said, isn't it true that Chief Petty Officer Dade, at the time of the arrest, was on his way to his niece's birthday party? Yes, the Admiral said. And isn't it true that this stop delayed him, causing him to miss a significant family event? No, the Admiral said. The stop did not cause him to miss the birthday party. The stop caused him to be arrested. But he did not miss the birthday party. He prioritized getting there, and he made it. That's who he is. That's what matters. The Admiral was asked no more questions. When he stood and left the courtroom, he again walked past every police officer in the room without looking at them. The statement was not made in words. The statement was made in absence. On Jade's 8th birthday, they had cake and ice cream and presents. Renee had decorated the porch with streamers. David had set up a small telescope on the table, and Jade used it to show everyone the thing she had learned to see. The storm on Jupiter, the redness of Mars, the particular light of Venus, which changed depending on where Venus was in its orbit. Astronomy is the study of things that are far away, Jade explained to the guests. The way an 8-year-old explains something to people she assumes do not know it. But we can still see them. We can see them even when they're far away. Later, after the guests had left and the cake had been finished and the presents had been opened, Marcus sat on the back porch with Renee while Jade played in the yard with her telescope. It's over, Renee said. What's over? Marcus asked, though he knew what she meant. The trial, the legal stuff, whatever this was, Renee said. It's done. It's not done, Marcus said quietly. It's decided, but it's not done. What happened to me? What happened to those other people? That's not done. That just got put on record. Being on record doesn't make it gone. It just makes it impossible to pretend it didn't happen. Renee was quiet. "Are you angry?" she asked. Marcus watched Jade in the yard. She was adjusting the telescope, aiming it at the sky, looking for planets that were not quite visible yet, because it was still light out. "I'm angry," he said, "and I'm grateful, and I'm sad, and I'm relieved. All of those things are true at the same time. I don't think you're supposed to feel all of them at once, but I do." "That sounds exhausting," Renee said. "It is," Marcus agreed, "but it's necessary. Like, if I only feel one thing, then I miss the complexity of what actually happened. And what actually happened is complex. It's not just a story about a bad cop. It's a story about a system that allowed the bad cop to do what he did, and about a man in that system who knew about it and didn't do anything, and about an admiral who decided that one night it was going to end, and about an 8-year-old girl who is standing in the yard looking at storms that have lasted 400 years. He paused. "So I have to feel all of it," Marcus said, "because all of it is true. The federal courthouse in Richmond, Virginia, is a building made of granite and authority. It stands at the corner of Broad and 9th Streets, and it contains within it the machinery by which the rule of law is supposed to function. On the first day of the trial, the building was filled with people who had come to watch the case of United States v. Brett Calloway. The prosecution was led by a woman named Victoria Hernandez, who had spent 12 years in the Civil Rights Division and had learned that justice is not something that happens by accident. It happens because someone decides to make it happen. The defense was led by a man named Robert Chen, who had been assigned to defend Calloway and who knew, from the moment he took the case, that there was no real defense available to him. He would have to create the appearance of a defense, because everyone is entitled to a defense. But the appearance would be exactly that, an appearance only. The prosecution began with its opening statement. Hernandez described the night of March 14th, when Marcus Dade had been stopped on Route 22. She described the telescope. She described the false charges. She described the deliberate bent card. She described the system that had allowed this to happen. And she described the specific moment when that system had finally been forced to look at itself. "This case is not about one bad officer," Hernandez said. "This case is about an officer who weaponized his badge against a man who had sacrificed 14 years of his life for this country. This case is about an officer who lied to justify an arrest. This case is about an officer who understood perfectly clearly that he was committing a crime, and who did it anyway because he had learned that his badge would protect him. That protection ends today." The defense opening statement was brief. Chen acknowledged the facts of the case, the stop, the arrest, the false charges, but argued that Calloway had been acting on reasonable suspicion and that the arrest, while ultimately unfounded, had not been made with criminal intent. "My client made a mistake," Chen said. "A serious mistake. A mistake that has consequences. But a mistake is not a crime." The prosecution called its first witness. It was Officer Jenkins, the dispatcher who had handled the stop. Jenkins testified that Calloway had radioed in that he was stopping a vehicle on Route 22 for suspected drug activity, but that the dispatch log reviewed after the arrest showed no prior indication that such activity had been suspected until after the stop had been made. "So Officer Calloway," the prosecutor asked, "reported that he suspected drug activity only after he had already initiated the stop?" "Yes," Jenkins said. "That's what the log shows." "How unusual is that?" Hernandez asked. "I've been a dispatcher for 8 years," Jenkins said. "It's not unusual for officers to discover something during a stop and then call it in, but it is unusual for an officer to report the suspicion only after the stop has begun. The prosecution presented its physical evidence next. The bent military ID was presented. The photographs were shown. A forensics expert testified that the bending was deliberate, consistent with someone using their fingers to apply pressure to the card while holding it, not consistent with the card being bent during processing or transport. Could this have happened by accident? Hernandez asked. No, the expert said. This is the result of deliberate application of force. The prosecution called the other victims. Thomas Bailey testified about the taillight that did not exist. Peter Gonzalez testified about the $400. Keisha Johnson testified about the pattern of stops. Each testimony was brief and powerful, and each testimony added to the narrative that was being constructed. A narrative of a pattern, a narrative of intention, a narrative of someone who had understood exactly what he was doing. Then came Maria Fuentes. She was 52 years old, and she walked to the stand the way people walk when they have been waiting a long time to be heard. She sat down, and the prosecutor asked her name and address and occupation, and then asked her about the night she had been stopped on Route 22. I was coming from my job, she said. Her English was careful, precise, the English of someone for whom it was a second language and who had learned it through work and attention. I was a home health aide. I had worked the full week. I was coming home with my earnings. I had $480 in my purse. How did you earn that money? Hernandez asked. Caring for people, Maria said. People who cannot care for themselves. I helped them with their meals, their medicine, their hygiene. I earned $480 in 5 days of this work. And then you were stopped? Hernandez said. Yes, Maria said. Officer Calloway pulled me over. He said my vehicle was weaving. It was not weaving. My vehicle was going exactly the speed limit, and it was going in my lane, but he said it was weaving. What happened next? Hernandez asked. He asked me to step out of the vehicle, Maria said. He asked me where I was coming from and where I was going. I told him I was coming from work, going home. He said he needed to search my vehicle. I said, okay, I had nothing to hide. I had done nothing wrong. Did you consent to the search? Hernandez asked. I didn't know I could say no, Maria said. He had a gun. He had a badge. I was alone on the side of the road. I did not know that I could say no. What happened during the search? Hernandez asked. He found my money, Maria said. $480. He held it up and said, where did you get this? I told him I earned it. He said, no, you didn't. You're running drugs. I told him I was not running drugs. I was coming home from my job. He said that didn't matter. He said the money could be used for drug sales, and he was taking it. He said it was the law. He said I could fight for it if I wanted to, but it would take lawyers and money, and I did not have either. The courtroom was silent. Did you file a complaint? Hernandez asked. Yes, Maria said. I went to the police station 3 days later. I asked for a complaint form. They gave me one. I filled it out. I asked what would happen next. They told me the complaint would be reviewed. They said it would take time. How much time? Hernandez asked. 3 years, Maria said. I filed the complaint. I called the station. I asked about it. They said it was still being reviewed. I called again 6 months later. Same answer. I called again a year later. Same answer, for 3 years. I called and asked, and they told me it was being reviewed. For 3 years. I did not have that money. I could not go to my daughter's graduation party because I did not have that money. I could not help my son when his car needed a repair because I did not have that money. For 3 years, I had filed a complaint about something that Officer Calloway had taken from me, and no one had done anything. And then, Hernandez asked. And then Chief Petty Officer Marcus Dade was arrested, Maria said. I read about it in the newspaper, and I understood that, finally, someone was going to look at what Officer Calloway had done. And I thought, maybe now they will listen to me. The prosecution called Sergeant Paul Grieco on the afternoon of the third day of trial. Grieco was 50 years old and had spent 20 years with the Ashford Police Department, and he walked to the stand like a man who was about to confess something that he had been carrying for a very long time. The prosecutor walked him through the filing of Maria Fuentes' complaint. She walked him through the procedure that should have been followed, the review, the documentation, the determination of whether the complaint had merit. She walked him through what actually happened, the complaint being filed in a drawer, the drawer not being opened, the procedure not being followed. Sergeant Grieco, Hernandez asked, why did you place the complaint in a drawer instead of processing it according to procedure? Grieco was quiet. When he spoke, his voice was very quiet, the voice of a man who had been waiting a long time to answer this question. Because if I processed it, he said, I would have to look at it. And if I looked at it, I would have to do something about it. And if I did something about it, I would have to admit that I knew what was happening. So I put the complaint in a drawer, and I didn't open the drawer, and I didn't ask myself any questions about it. What questions should you have asked yourself? Hernandez asked. Grieco looked at the prosecutor. He looked at the judge. He looked at Officer Calloway, sitting at the defense table. And for a moment, Grieco allowed himself to look at the man he had protected for 3 years. I should have asked myself, Grieco said, whether I was a police officer. I should have asked myself whether what I was doing was law enforcement or whether it was just looking away. I should have asked myself what I was protecting and why. I should have asked myself whether the answer to all of those questions was the kind of answer I could live with. Could you? Hernandez asked. No, Grieco said, and he began to cry. I couldn't. I can't. Officer Calloway took the stand on the afternoon of the fourth day. He was wearing the same suit that did not quite fit him. He had lost more weight since the jury selection began. He looked like a man whose life was being taken from him, which was, in fact, the case. The prosecutor walked him through the evening of the stop. She asked him about the telescope. She asked him about the paraphernalia. She asked him about the lies in his incident report. Calloway's responses were careful. He said he had had reasonable suspicion. He said he had been acting within his authority. He said he had not deliberately bent the military ID. That had happened in the process of examining it. The prosecutor showed him the photographs. Officer Calloway, she said, these photographs show your hand holding the military ID while it is being bent. Can you explain how that happened as a result of processing rather than deliberate action? Calloway stared at the photographs for a long time. I bent it, he said finally. Why? Hernandez asked. Because I was angry, Calloway said. Why were you angry? Hernandez asked. Calloway was quiet. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet that the courtroom had to lean forward to hear him. Because I looked at him, Calloway said, and I saw someone who had become what I tried to become and failed. I saw someone who was calm and professional and everything that I tried to be in the Army and couldn't be. I saw someone who had succeeded at something I couldn't do. And I was angry about that. The courtroom was completely silent. "And so you arrested him?" Hernandez said quietly. "Yes," Calloway said, "for something he didn't do." "Yes," Calloway said. "For a telescope." "Yes," Calloway said. "Officer Calloway," Hernandez said, "you have stopped 41 individuals on Route 22 in the past 3 years. 31 of those individuals were people of color. Did you arrest them because they had become something you failed to become?" The defense attorney stood to object, but Judge Hardin overruled the objection. Calloway had opened the door. The prosecution was entitled to walk through it. "No," Calloway said. "I arrested them because they looked like they were involved in something, because they fit a profile." "What profile?" Hernandez asked. "A drug dealer profile," Calloway said. "And what does a drug dealer profile look like?" Hernandez asked. Calloway did not answer. "Officer Calloway," Hernandez said, "all 31 of the individuals you stopped who fit this profile were people of color. Is that correct?" "I don't remember," Calloway said. "Would it refresh your recollection if I showed you the statistics?" Hernandez asked. She produced a document. She handed it to Calloway. She allowed him to read it. "Yes," Calloway said finally. 31 of the stops involved people of color. "And is there any reason to believe," Hernandez asked, "that people of color are more likely to be drug dealers on Route 22 than people who are not people of color?" "No," Calloway said. "And yet you stopped them 31 times. You stopped them because they were people of color. Isn't that correct?" The defense attorney objected again. The judge overruled the objection again. "I stopped them because I suspected them," Calloway said. "Based on what?" Hernandez asked. "Based on..." Calloway trailed off. "Based on what they looked like." "Based on their race," Hernandez said. "Yes," Calloway said, "based on their race." The verdict came back on a Thursday at 3:47 p.m. Guilty on all 3 counts. The courtroom erupted, but not in celebration. It erupted in the sound of relief. The sound of something that had been held in tension finally being released. Marcus was sitting in the gallery, and he did not move. He did not stand. He did not react. He simply sat. And he allowed the verdict to settle into his body. And he understood, with the specific clarity that comes from clarity, that this verdict did not change what had happened. It simply made what had happened official. The sentencing came 3 weeks later. Judge Hardin sentenced Officer Brett Calloway to 10 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 5 years. The sentence was read in a courtroom that was silent except for the sound of Judge Hardin's voice, and when the sentence was finished, Officer Calloway stood up and was led out of the courtroom by 2 federal marshals. He did not look at anyone. He did not acknowledge anyone. He simply walked out of the courtroom and into the federal prison system, which would contain him for the next 10 years, while he learned what it meant to have done what he had done. 3 weeks after the sentencing, Marcus went to his father's house in Richmond. His father had died 7 years ago, but Marcus's mother still lived there, and the house contained within it a small room that had belonged to Leonard Dade when he was alive. Marcus had never spent much time in that room. His father had not encouraged visits, but now, with his mother's permission, Marcus entered the room and looked for the shoebox. It was still there, still under the bed, still containing the evidence of 14 traffic stops made over 23 years on the same route home from football practice. Marcus took the box out and opened it and looked at the tickets. He did not read the charges. He knew the charges. He simply held each ticket in his hands and understood, with the specific weight of understanding. That his father had collected this evidence not because it was going to help him, but because the collecting itself was a form of documentation. The collecting was a way of saying, I was right about this. I know what happened. And someday, maybe someone will understand what I know. Marcus took photographs of each ticket. He put the photographs in a folder. He contacted Special Agent Diana Reyes at the FBI, and he told her about the shoebox and about the 16 additional complaints that it contained. And he asked her if she would like to add them to the federal investigation into Calloway's conduct and into the Ashford Police Department's institutional failures. She said she would. 66 complaints in total. 66 people who had been stopped on Route 22 at night and found their lives altered because they did not fit a particular profile. 66 people who had been believed. Finally, because one man had decided that the way you win matters as much as whether you win. 2 months after the sentencing, Marcus was promoted to Master Training Specialist at Naval Special Warfare Command. The promotion came with a raise and with access to resources that he had never had before. Admiral Hargrove signed the promotion orders himself, and when he handed them to Marcus, he said something that Marcus would remember for the rest of his life. You did the right thing, the Admiral said. The hard way, in a system that was designed to make the hard way harder. And you did it anyway. That's what leadership is. Marcus accepted the promotion. He accepted the raise. He accepted the resources. And he used them to build something that he had been thinking about since the night of the arrest. A program to train law enforcement in the specific discipline of recognizing bias, of understanding how the discipline of law enforcement could be corrupted by fear, of learning that your training means something only if you are willing to use it correctly. The program was called The Professional's Way. It was a 40-hour training curriculum that taught officers how to recognize the moments when their personal inadequacy could become the justification for institutional abuse. It taught officers about the specific architecture of failure. It taught officers that a badge was not protection for wrongdoing. It was responsibility. It taught officers that the way you carry your authority matters as much as whether you have authority. 17 police departments sent officers to the program in its first year, by the end of 3 years. It had trained over 3,000 officers. Not all of them took the training seriously. Not all of them understood it. But some of them did. Some of them understood exactly what Marcus was trying to teach them, that the moment you see another officer beginning to build the structure of corruption, you have a choice. You can look away, like Sergeant Greco looked away, or you can open the drawer. 1 month after Calloway's conviction, Jade turned 8. Marcus made sure to be there. He drove down on Friday night and brought chocolate cake, and he sat on the grass with his niece and looked at Jupiter through the telescope with her name on the eyepiece. Jade had learned the names of the features now. She could point to the great red spot and explain what it was. A storm that had been raging for 400 years, and it would probably keep raging for 400 years more, because Jupiter would not let itself be knocked out of orbit just because something inside it was wrong. Do you think, Jade asked, that the people who run things, like the important people, do you think they know about the storm? Do you think they know what's wrong with their planet? I think they know, Marcus said. The question is whether they do anything about it. Do they? Jade asked. Sometimes, Marcus said. Not always, but sometimes. Jade adjusted the telescope and looked at Jupiter for a long time. Then she asked, Do you think we're going to be okay? And Marcus understood that his 8-year-old niece was not asking about Jupiter anymore. She was asking about the world. She was asking about whether the storm that ran through her country, through her society, through the institutions that were supposed to protect her, would knock everything out of orbit, or whether people could somehow keep moving forward anyway. "Yes," Marcus said. "I think we're going to be okay. Not because the storm stops. I don't think it ever stops. But because people keep looking at it. People keep saying it's there. People keep working to understand it. That's what keeps things in orbit." Jade seemed satisfied with this answer. She returned her attention to Jupiter and spent the rest of the evening cataloging its features. 6 months after Calloway's sentencing, Special Agent Diana Reyes sits in her office in Richmond, Virginia, and closes a file. The file is marked Calloway Investigation, but the contents are broader than Calloway. The contents are 66 complaints. The contents are 11 years of civil asset forfeiture. The contents are approximately $280,000 that moved through the wrong hands. The contents are an unknown number of people who were stopped on Route 22 at night and did not file complaints because they had learned, through hard experience, that filing would cost more than it returned. Reyes has been a federal agent for 16 years. She has built cases. This one is different not because of its size, but because of what it contains, the particular grief of 66 people who were right about something and waited years to be believed. She prints the case closure summary. She notes in the summary that the investigation was initiated by the arrest of Chief Petty Officer Marcus Dade, who was stopped because he was black, who was cuffed because he was calm, and whose DOD card was bent by a man who had already decided who he was and could not afford to be wrong. She notes that Calloway's arrest cleared 66 cases that would otherwise have remained in drawers. She notes this without calling it a silver lining. It is not a silver lining that 66 people needed one man's arrest to be believed, but it is the truth of what happened, and the record is honest. She files the summary. She turns off the office light. On Route 22, at 11:47 p.m., a car drives north. The driver is not being followed. The driver is not being watched. The driver is on a public road, going to a place they are going, at the speed they chose. The road belongs to everyone now. It should always have. 2 years after Marcus Dade's arrest, he stands on the back porch of his cabin near Little Creek, Virginia. The cabin is his now. He bought it with part of his raise, part of his settlement from the civil suit he filed against the Ashford Police Department, part of the understanding that some things cannot be bought back, but can be acknowledged. The porch faces east, toward the tree line. At this time of year, in late autumn, the trees are bare enough that you can see through to the water beyond. There is a coffee maker on the small table. Marcus has just made coffee. He is about to sit down and watch the evening come when his phone rings. The screen says, "Renee." "She's outside right now," Renee says when Marcus answers. "Hold on." A shuffling sound. Then Jade's voice, slightly breathless, as if she has run to get to the phone. "Uncle Marcus, I saw it. I could see the stripes." "What did you see?" Marcus asks. "Jupiter. I could see the stripes. They're brown and orange, and there's a spot, a big red spot, like a storm that never stops." Dad looked it up. He said the storm has been going for 400 years. Marcus is quiet for a moment, holding the phone, looking at the tree line in the gathering darkness. "A 400-year storm," he says. "But it's still there," Jade says. "Jupiter is still there. The storm doesn't knock it out of orbit." Jade did not mean this as a lesson. She is reporting what she saw through a telescope with her name on the eyepiece, because she is going to be an astronomer, and this is what astronomers do. Marcus hears it as a lesson anyway. He is allowed. "You're right," he says. "The storm doesn't knock it out of orbit." "Are you coming for Thanksgiving?" Jade asks, with the immediacy of someone for whom Jupiter and Thanksgiving are equally important topics. "Yes," Marcus says. "You always say yes." "I always mean it," Marcus says. The line goes quiet. Marcus sits with the phone in his hand, the tree line in front of him, the coffee on the rail growing cold. He thinks about his father's shoebox, now in a federal evidence file in Richmond. He thinks about Maria Fuentes' $480, returned with a letter that said she was right. He thinks about Grieco on the stand, saying, "The drawer should have been opened." He thinks about Jade looking for planets. The machine is not fixed. It has never been fully fixed. But something specific happened on Route 22. It is in the record. The record is in federal hands, somewhere in Ashford. A woman named Maria Fuentes has a letter on her wall that says she was right. A girl named Jade is outside in the dark with a telescope, looking for a planet with rings. Marcus finishes his coffee. Tomorrow there is work. Tonight, Friday, the porch, the tree line. It is enough.